the situation in Saudi Arabia and the situation in Qatar. Whether in peacetime or in conflict, for the Indian migrant workers, the situation is the same. Our recommendation to the Government of India and to the state government in Kerala and others is that if at the pre-departure stage, if Indian migrant workers are protected through a strong immigration law that protects their basic rights, they will not have be facing this situation that they are currently facing, let's say, in Iraq. On 21st June, we alerted the Government of India and also we shared our information with the press that Indian workers are stranded in Iraq, that their passports have been taken away by their employers, that they do not have money to come back, and it developed into a big story. But there was enough time to have averted this, kind of situation that we are seeing today that Indian migrant workers are facing in Iraq. The question that I would really want you to focus on is really the question about why did the nurses delay their departure from that hospital in Tikrit? Even before ISIS approached Tikrit, there was enough time for them to have been evacuated and vacated. Why did they kept staying there? The reason was, we've been in touch with the nurses. Several of them had not even been paid for 4 months. The Iraqi authorities in some cases were not willing to process the payment because in some cases the contractual obligation was that you would get paid after 4 months. Now these are people who had taken heavy loans in India, either for their education or to facilitate their journey to Iraq, and therefore could not come back because that would have meant losing out significant income. So they kept holding on, thinking that they will get their money and that they would be evacuated, and but the time ran out. So what we are trying to point out is, today it is Indian workers in Iraq. Last year it was Indian workers in Saudi Arabia. Last year in November 2013 we documented about how Indian workers in Qatar, who are building the infrastructure for the 2022 FIFA World Cup, how they are being exploited and how their rights are being abused. And what we are really appealing to the Indian government and to the state government in Kerala is to really look at what can you do at the pre-departure stage. There are other countries who send migrant workers to Gulf countries who do a much better job of protecting their citizens. So why is the government of India repeatedly letting down its own citizens who actually bring back 500 billion Indian rupees every year? It's a massive contribution to Indian GDP. These are poor Indian workers who are involved in nation building activities not only in India by the massive remittance, but also building infrastructure and involved in activities in the Gulf nations. And what do we give back in return? We are demanding for more accountability from the government to enact a law that protects the rights of the Indian migrant workers at the pre-departure stage. That's the focus of our research findings. We are happy to open the floor for Q&A, and we'll be happy to respond to your queries.
Do you think that there was a couple of laxity on the part of the centers in addressing the current situation?
What we are saying is that the government, the central government in Delhi, not only now, but has been aware for several years now, that they need to do more to protect the rights of its own citizens working abroad. From that point of view, the lack of an effective immigration law certainly comes in the way of protecting the rights of Indian citizens who work abroad, and also puts them in danger. For instance, if the Protectorate of Immigrants, there are 8 Protectorate of Immigrants offices in India, they are duty bound to check the contracts on which people go to Iraq. If they had checked this contract, they would have found that the contract is heavily loaded against the Indian nurses. How can a situation happen where you sign a contract where your payment comes 4 months after you start work? Now, these are issues that the government needs to seriously look into. Our research finding is that whether in peacetime or in conflict, Indian workers working abroad who contribute massively to India's GDP, needs better protection and better accountability from the government of India.
So is it that larger issue that you're pointing out, or are you specifically saying, when you're throwing an insinuation, when you say the government had enough time to act before the situation reverses? So are you suggesting that an evacuation is possible in an area where nobody is in trance?
What I'm suggesting is, and what the media has also reported extensively on this, all the nurses in Iraq were constantly telling the media, and through the media to their families and to the government, that they haven't been paid. And because they haven't been paid, they do not want to leave. Certainly, a situation could have been, this situation could have been averted if the payments were made in time.
Payments aside, since you are a humanitarian organization,
We are a human rights organization.
Okay, sorry, human rights organization looking at human rights needs. Would you think that Modi's Bhutan visit, kind of superseded this evacuation process, because that happened around the same time? MEA was really busy with the first official state visit of the Prime Minister. Do you think, because I'm just taking off where Anand left off, what is your opinion on that?
Our opinion on this is that I think the Indian migrant workers' rights issue, the entire issue of Indian migrant workers is completely absent in the policy radar of the establishment. So therefore, and this is not something new. We've been saying this for a long time now, Amnesty as an organization, that the government of India must shift focus to protecting and defending the rights of Indian migrant workers abroad, and not only be merely interested in the remittances that they send home. Look, and that is true even for the government of Kerala. 33% of this state, Kerala state's net domestic product, comes from money sent by migrant workers. But as Nikhil has pointed out in his research, at the pre-departure stage, hardly 3,500 people to 6,000 people actually get a decent briefing to be aware of what their rights are. And nearly 100,000 people got visas to go abroad to work. So what we are pointing out is the gap in the policy focus. There is a huge...
You're saying that the visa brokers are massive illegal. How is it that they get the rectified? One of the recommendations say that
Yes.
the entire visa broker issue itself is illegal. So how is it that they can be rectified?
So, a survey conducted in 2007 that 8% of people only depend on registered recruiting agents. Now, the best way to do it is actually give them temporary licenses where they're tied to recruiting agents. These are recommendations that research in Indonesia and all have pointed out, where you give them specific licenses for short-term periods where they can recruit them. And brokers need to be informed that if for example they are responsible for any kind of abuse, they will be prosecuted and they will bear charges for serious crimes like forced labor and trafficking. So the thing is to try and license them for specific
Your
Maybe
Yeah.
the problem with the Saudi Arabian visa, it is not channelized in the regular manner. Most of people from Kerala or from Malappuram go to Saudi Arabia with a single visa or job visa, free visa. And there is no check and cross-check during the time of the immigration or stamping the visas. And as far as Indian government is concerned, they just interested only the money they are going to give. It is not the current situation which has been going on for a long period of time. Look at Philippines, which is also contributing large number of migrant workers. But they scrutinize the visas very, very strictly and monitor the situation. Whenever the people from Philippines face some problems in any country, their embassies intervene in the matter, take up the issue, and even they sue the government. But India was never doing it. And Do you think that suggesting these things will change their focus?
Some of the issues you pointed out, Jimon, I mean, those are clearly the issues that we have documented in our report. There are recruitment agents who are authorized by the Saudi government via their consulate and embassies. But what happens is that Saudi nationals who under their kafala law can issue visas, sell that visa to brokers. Those brokers in turn sell the visa through agents. For instance, in Kerala, it is very rampant. And then those people who get a visa review letter issued by purchasing it, go to these recruitment agents and then get the visa stamp. In that process, it falls to the regulatory cracks because the recruitment agents do not do a good job of doing the due diligence. In fact, they are on record in our research saying that this is not what they want to do. And the Protector of Immigrants, which is the enforcement body, do not have enough capacity and resources to actually do a good enforcement job. And because it is in this mess, our belief is that, like I said earlier, they fall through the policy gap because there is not enough attention being paid to vulnerable Indian migrant workers who are going to foreign countries in millions and sending back billions of rupees home, which is helping Indian economy, which is contributing to the GDP, which is bigger than India's IT exports. But the government is not accountable to its own citizens that is making this massive contribution because they are absent from policy focus.
You have these, you keep reiterating about how they send billions of rupees, but when they do come back and the government initiates rehabilitation programs, none of these banks that hold these billions of rupees come forward to offer any incentive. As of now, Kerala's NODCA program only has Canara Bank, which is the lead bank, and maybe Union Bank of India on board. They're still in negotiation with the bank. So none of the banks are even interested in coming forward and helping these people. So why aren't we looking at a broader perspective than just saying government of Kerala and government of India and policy?
And I'll add to that. You said, how can they have a law where nurses are paid 4 months after? I mean, they should know they are not even paid together. What do they do?
I think there are two separate points in what you're making. One is that I think if I were to slightly generalize the question you're asking, there are economic dimensions to this problem that may not that may not be fixed by policy regulations alone. There are other actors who need to get involved, which is certainly true. But what we are saying is the basis for that must be a good, strong policy framework, which we do not have at this point of time. And the gentleman there pointed out correctly that there are other countries in our neighborhood who do a much better job of dealing with that. The second point you're making is that these abuses that we see are rampant within the country too. And that is the point that you're making, that the plight of our workers, whether they're working in India or abroad, there seems to be quite a massive abuse there. And that is definitely, within India there is another trend as well. There is massive internal movement. We shouldn't call it migration because we're one nation, but there's a very large movement across the country. We're all seeing that. And plight of those people is definitely something that needs far greater attention. And we are definitely going to, in the future, look at those issues. But this is the beginning of a piece of work. And I think in what Mr. Jimon said was also the question of how do we think we'll be able to make a difference now. I think one of the reasons why there's been an absence of policy focus is this issue has never had the kind of, let's say, prominence. As Sachi was pointing out, it's not been there in the sort of radar, if you like.
Malayalam movies have been made of
that is true,
it's
but
in popular culture.
it isn't
Everybody
popular.
knows, but despite it, they don't.
Correct. No, there is an economic pressure on people to let's say, to take up these jobs under any circumstance. As a state, the state definitely has the obligation to make sure that they are not vulnerable and their rights are protected and so on and so on. That's the point that has been, I would say, not enough emphasis has been on. I mean, the fact that there is a problem is well known, but the fact that the state has to do something here and has to do something urgently, that's what we hope to focus on.
Do you have any ground level report from Saudi Arabia? Because the higher science, there's a chance of higher science people to be called up, and the Saudi people are actually massing the level quota. So is there a thought, or is there a need for being alert about the important situation in Saudi Arabia?
Right now, from a human rights perspective, we do not have any such information at this point in time, but there is an evolving geopolitical situation that you pointed out. But from a human rights perspective, we don't have anything to comment at this point in time.
There's some troop movement along the border.
You said you did
Yes,
51.
we've read that in news reports about Saudi Arabia deploying forces along the border. Other than that, from a, how will it impact human rights situation and all of that? I mean, we do not have any, at this point in time, any ground level reports.
You said about 51, interviewing 51 returned to the paid workers. What proportion of it were women?
We did not focus on domestic workers in this report for two reasons. One was because the Nitakat primarily focused on the private sector, and therefore, domestic workers were left out. Secondly, at least like Jiman was saying, the protections, the rampant way in which visas are sold, with free visas and things like that, which is what is common in Kerala, is not something that happens with domestic workers particularly, and the government has, at least on paper, significantly greater protections. So we have not focused on women in the report.
So they're all construction workers.
They are construction workers. They're employed in cafeterias. A range of low paid jobs in Saudi Arabia.
When you're saying you have to be honest, you're arguing for a complete departure
Yeah, that's
law.
government to be doing.
Now, are you ruling out that everything is okay in the country of migration? Or is there any law where loopholes are still there, where the governments can sit together and do something?
Yeah. So our report actually has recommendations to the government of Saudi Arabia, which includes, reforming some of its labor laws, enforcing some of them actively, and changing the kafala system. Now the kafala system, binds an employer to its worker, and he can't move jobs. He can't even come back if he's been exploited. Now the government in early this year signed a bilateral agreement with Saudi Arabia to deal with domestic workers. But I think the government of India has engaged in bilateral agreements with other countries in the Gulf. But one of the things is that the enforcement of it. How are you going to take it forward? And I think that's one of the clear shortfalls. On the Saudi bilateral agreement that's been signed, it only covers domestic workers. So a larger section of migrant workers is left out.
Just as a matter of information, none of us are able to speak in Malayalam, but we understand Malayalam. So if anybody prefers to throw us a question in Malayalam, we are capable of comprehending and responding.